Have you ever heard of a book so sharp, so funny that it could actually take down an entire era's way of thinking? Well, that's Voltaire's Candide. It's not just some old story, it was a weapon. And in this explainer, we're going to see exactly how Voltaire aimed it right at the heart of 18th century optimism. So, back in the 18th century, this was the big question on everyone's mind. Seriously, philosophers, poets, you name it, they were all debating it. Is this world, with all of its obvious problems, really the best one a perfect God could have possibly made? It sounds kind of strange to us now, right? But this wasn't some fringe idea. This was the mainstream belief. And this slide really gets to the core of the conflict. On one side, you had this super popular philosophy, all about progress, reason, and a God who had a wonderful plan for everything. But on the other side, well, you had reality. War, disasters, disease, suffering. Voltaire saw this massive gap between the neat idea and the messy reality, and he just couldn't let it go. So why was Voltaire so fired up about this? To get it, we really have to transport ourselves back to 18th century Europe, which was, believe it or not, an age of, as one historian put it, overriding optimism. Now, you might be asking, why was everyone so optimistic? Well, to be fair, they had some pretty good reasons. Science was making these incredible discoveries. There were actual medical breakthroughs. And after centuries of chaos, a lot of Europe was finally enjoying some peace and getting wealthier. All of this fed into this powerful feeling that human progress was just unstoppable. So it all comes down to this one core idea, pushed by huge thinkers like the philosopher Leibniz and the poet Alexander Pope. Their argument basically went like this. A perfect, all-powerful God must have created the best possible world. So any evil or suffering we see, that's just a tiny, necessary piece of a much bigger, benevolent plan that our little human brains just can't comprehend. But then, reality has the way of crashing the party, and it did. Hard. A whole series of brutal events kicked off that made this comfy philosophy look not just wrong, but totally ridiculous. You see, philosophers at the time were wrestling with what they called the problem of evil. They basically split it into two categories. You have natural evil, all the awful stuff we don't cause, like earthquakes, tsunamis, and disease. And then you have moral evil, and that's all on us. That's war, cruelty, all the terrible things we do to each other. And look, this wasn't some abstract debate happening in an ivory tower. This was real life. In 1755, a monster earthquake just leveled the city of Lisbon. A year later, the 7 Years' War exploded into what was basically a world war. And all this time, disease and poverty were just a constant grinding reality for most people. These events weren't just problems, they were worldview shattering. I mean, just take that Lisbon earthquake. We're talking about an estimated 60,000 people gone. Many of them were crushed inside churches while they were praying on a major holiday. For someone like Voltaire, this was just the most horrific, undeniable proof against that best of all worlds idea. How could anyone possibly justify this? And this is where our guy Voltaire steps onto the stage. As one of the leading thinkers of his day, he knew he had to respond. But he didn't pick up a pen to write a dry, academic essay. No, he chose a much more powerful weapon. You have to understand, Voltaire was an empiricist. That's a fancy way of saying he was a show-me-the-evidence kind of guy. He trusted what he could see, what he could observe in the real world. So these abstract theories that tried to explain away suffering, despite all the evidence to the contrary, to him, they were just an insult to human reason. So put yourself in his shoes for a second. How do you even begin to challenge an entire culture's mindset? How do you get people to question a philosophy that gives them so much comfort, even if you think it's a dangerous illusion? His answer was absolutely brilliant. He knew some formal, philosophical takedown would only be read by a handful of scholars. But a story, a funny, wild, shocking, fast-paced adventure, that could reach everybody. He wrote Candide to show people how absurd this optimism was, not just tell them. So let's break down how he pulled it off. What was his secret weapon? It all came down to one powerful literary tool: satire. He didn't just argue with his opponents, he made them look ridiculous. So what is satire exactly? Well, it's the art of using humor, irony, and wild exaggeration to criticize something. Instead of standing up and yelling, "That idea is stupid," you create a situation where the idea exposes its own stupidity. It's way more effective. And this quote just nails Voltaire's genius. He wasn't preachy about it. He knew he couldn't just get on a soapbox and lecture his audience. That's not how you change minds. Good storytelling doesn't tell you what to think. It gives you the space to figure it out for yourself. So instead of lecturing, he creates these characters who stubbornly cling to their philosophy while the absolute worst things happen to them. We're talking war, shipwreck, torture, disease, you name it, it happens in this book. And by showing us that huge gap between their beliefs and their reality, he trusts us, the readers, to see how absurd it all is. What's so cool about the book is that it's really two journeys happening at once. You have the wild physical journey where the main character, Candide, literally travels all over the world. But the more important journey is the philosophical one. He starts out as this naive kid who believes his teacher that everything is for the best, and he ends as a man whose entire worldview has been completely reshaped by brutal first-hand experience. Okay, so after all that, all the satire, all the suffering, all the adventure, what's the legacy of this little book? What was Voltaire's ultimate point? What are we supposed to take away from it all? Well, Voltaire basically goes down a checklist and demolishes every single argument the optimist had. The idea that evil is part of a grand divine plan, he shows how that leads people to passively accept horrible things. The idea that suffering is a punishment for sin, he has the most innocent characters suffer the most horrific fates. And that final mantra, whatever is right, he makes it sound like the craziest thing anyone could possibly say. But here's the thing, and this is so crucial. Voltaire doesn't just tear down one easy philosophy to give us a new one. The book's ending is famously, well, it's not simple. His goal wasn't to hand us a new comfort blanket. It was to rip the old one away and force us to look at the world honestly, with all its chaos and unfairness. And that leaves us, you and me, with the exact same challenge Voltaire threw down over 250 years ago. If blind optimism is a dangerous trap, then what's the alternative? Candide doesn't give us a neat and tidy answer. Instead, it suggests something radical, that maybe the point isn't to find a comfortable philosophy at all, but to simply get to work. To face the world as it is, and, as the book's famous last line says, to cultivate our garden. That's the question Candide leaves us with. In a world that is clearly not perfect, what garden will you choose to build?